Have you ever heard of Wolfman Zapp? I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't. It was an animatronic wolf that was supposed to be the mascot of Zapp's Bar and Grill, and no one even knows if it was ever actually used, or if there were just prototypes created. Zapp's Bar and Grill was an odd place itself. It was basically a Chuck E. Cheese, but for adults, with things like risque videotapes playing in the men and women's rooms. Not a big surprise that this place never really took off. Believe it or not, I had an uncle that worked as a busboy at one of these ever so strange establishments. And what he told me about the place is unbelievable, to say the least. He said that the parties were insane. Like, things went on that definitely should not have been from a legal or moral perspective, let alone a place based on an established kids' restaurant. I think that is where our story starts, though, regarding Wolfman Zapp. My uncle claims that Wolfman was used, and not only that, he was the center of attention most of the time, having bras and other adult clothing items hanging from him all the time, pretty much every night. That wasn't the bad part, though. The bad part was the weird group of guys that came together in one of these places out of Tampa, Florida, who I can almost guarantee were the final reason the chain shut down. He said that they used to meet in secret after the restaurant would close down, and they would always situate themselves at a table right next to Wolfman Zapp. They were able to do this because the manager and his wife were actually part of the group. One weeknight, when my uncle was supposed to have already left for the evening, he decided to stay in the back kitchen, doing some extra cleanup. He was really trying to move his way up at the place, so he wanted the boss to see him in the best possible light that he could. He had just gotten done doing a deep clean of the rubber floor mats when he heard something that he says he can never get out of his mind again. It was like a robotic voice of a child crying and begging. However, it was distinctly robotic, like not coming from someone hiding in the restaurant. Wondering why this group would be listening to something so disturbing, my uncle quietly headed into the dining area to check it out. There was a party going on. The group, mostly in their late 40s, were dressed in tuxedos and top hats, and the women were scantily clad and sat on the men's laps while holding bottles of champagne in hand. The entire group was contained within a circle of salt, and they were sitting around the Wolfman Zapp, looking up at him, laughing hysterically. The manager and his wife were standing outside of the ring, just watching as well, although they didn't seem as happy about it. They almost looked as if they were uncomfortable with the situation, but were trying to act pleased. The weirdest part, though, was that there was a young girl who seemed petrified, staring at the wall, not making any noise, just zoned out in silence. Then he heard sobbing start coming from the animatronic, its hands slowly lifted, covering its wolf-like face.
Please let me out. Please. Sally, help me.
A young boy's voice wailed. One of the women opened her eyes wide and looked at the animatronic, amazed, as she took a swig of champagne. Then an angered and panicked scream erupted from Wolfman Zapp, louder than I ever thought was possible from one of those things. It flailed around, trying to move, only his legs were bolted to the ground. The crowd erupted with laughter, as one of the men with the top hat took some champagne and poured it on the animatronic's head. At that moment, my uncle noticed a tear drip down the owner's wife's cheek. Petrified, my uncle went back into the kitchen and sat against the wall, practically passing out from hyperventilation. He says he doesn't remember ever being that terrified in his entire life, although he knew he had to do something. He just didn't know what. So he waited there for what felt like hours until the group ended up leaving. As the managers were locking up the back door, my uncle came up to them and told them what he saw.
Just forget about it, kid. If you tell anyone, especially the police, we seriously won't be able to help you,
the manager said with an aura of intense seriousness. My uncle decided to quit the next day, but could not get the event out of his head. So much so that he put in an anonymous tip with the police. After a few weeks, he never heard about anything happening. Seemed like it was just business as usual at the place. Then, as a last-ditch effort, he sent an anonymous letter to the corporate office telling them what was occurring in their restaurants. Although it was sent anonymously, somehow he still received a response from the company. And what the letter said was terrifying.
We are aware of the situation at our Tampa location you described. This is an internal matter, and your discretion is not only advisable but necessary. Further discussion or disclosure is strongly discouraged for your own safety and well-being. Regards, Zapp's corporate office.
A couple weeks later, he heard that the company filed for bankruptcy, and apparently the animatronics were going to be disassembled and sold off to different establishments. However, back in 2015, a photo emerged of Wolfman Zapp attached to the front of someone's truck. That sent a chill down his spine, and my uncle tried to find the location of the truck owner for months, but he couldn't locate them. He still to this day wonders if someone was torturing this poor person, who was somehow trapped inside this animatronic. The thought of their consciousness sustaining that many years of misery is just incredibly painful to fathom. Even close to a decade later, he still finds it hard to talk about the entire ordeal and wonders if justice will ever truly be served.